Next, we have our presentation by Michael Monzon, Archaeological Dipterology, Flies as Evidence from Past Civilizations. All right, welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, friends and fellow dipterists. I am really excited for this opportunity to share with you all a glimpse into the world of archaeological dipterology. Flies are really important proxies and indicators in the investigations of paleo or past environments. So in naturally occurring depositional environments, the chironomid larval head capsules are widely used, very popular proxies for understanding changes that have occurred in naturally occurring freshwater environments. But over in human-associated or archaeological sites, we're mainly dealing with the puparia of calypterate flies. Similarly to those freshwater environments, what we're looking for here are the community assemblage of flies, which is what we're actually going to try to draw conclusions about our human study population from. So that community assemblage of flies can indicate things like livestock rearing, occupation versus abandonment, and treatment of waste disposal. In the specific context of ancient or historical burials, though that kind of investigation is going to draw very heavily from forensic entomology, where we are essentially looking at the seasonality of deposition. In a historical context, we're not able to get those fine scale resolution determinations like a postmortem interval, but instead what we're looking for are the potential season that that person was interred. And so today I'm going to share some results from two archaeological investigations that I'm currently involved in here in North America. The first is historic St. Mary's City, which was the first permanent English settlement in the American state of Maryland. And so the research subject that we're investigating here was named Philip Calvert. He was the landowner and essentially the proprietor over the colony, and he and his family were found in some of the three of the only lead-topped coffins that have been excavated here in the New World. So on the left, you can see those three coffins. That was his Calvert. On the far right, your far right, his first wife and the child by his second wife. We're not sure where she ended up. But what we're interested in here is getting a glimpse into the inner workings of, or the environmental conditions of of this colony when it was in operation during the 1600s. The other site that we're going to be talking about today is the Nathaniel Russell Estate Kitchen House in Charleston, South Carolina. The kitchen house was a domestic residence for enslaved individuals prior to the ending of chattel slavery here in the United States. And what this site represents is an abrupt abandonment and cessation of those activities that were associated with that original use period. And today I'm going to be focusing on what we found on the first floor in the parlor and the kitchen. So just to give you some geographic reference point, here's a historic map of Charleston with the Nathaniel Russell Estate marked by a blue star. I'm just briefly going to go over the materials and methods that we generally use in these investigations. So usually, at least with in these two investigations, it was all dry sieving material through successively smaller sieves, 2 and 4 millimeters. And then we were looking for the non-repeating sclerites or remains. So for our flies, that's going to be either whole puparia or the fragments that contain both posterior sclerites. And so that is going to be our minimum number of individuals, which we're using to represent our occurrence and abundance. At my historic St. Mary City site, we also paired that archaeological entomology research with a survey of the modern insects that currently exist there. So the two ways that we went about doing that was a replica coffin, a mini version of the type of receptacle that Calvert and his family were found in, which we put ethically sourced deceased piglets in twice a season for an entire year. And then we also paired that with pitfall trapping of two different locations that were associated with the Calvert remains. So interestingly, in the Calvert coffin, we have thousands and thousands of insect remains. However, there are only 4 individual flies that we have been able to find amongst all of those other remains. And that's going to be the head of one adult fly and then the pupil remains of 3 others. So on the far left, we have what I've identified as Megacelia sclaris, and then 2 others that we are still working on identifying. The problem with archaeological entomology is that sometimes you won't be able to identify some of the remains that you find because there are just not enough diagnostic characters, and that's just something that I've chosen to just accept and to glean what information we can. Along with that, we have some interesting results from our modern survey. So the blowfly Sinomia cadaverina was actually captured in all 4 seasons, either in the replica coffin or in pitfall traps. Then we also had a delay of colonization. We actually were able to observe at least 1 week in July that blowflies were delayed colonizing the remains by, and so we found that to be interesting. Moving on to the kitchen house, on that first floor, we were able to find 45 total puparia, and those are almost totally concentrated in the kitchen, which we can actually see or is illustrated a bit more clearly when we compare that to a few other insect taxa that were found. So some other pest insects that were also found on the first floor, spider beetles and the puparia of moths. Those were more evenly distributed across the first floor, while we see the fly remains are very much or mostly restricted to the kitchen or food preparation areas. So our records for historic St. Mary City, we do actually have written records for both sites because they firmly fall into the historical period. They're really not that old by archaeological standards. And so from letters that we have from Calvert's nephew and from pollen records, we have indications that Calvert died in the winter of 1683. His remains were stored in the same area that we had used for that replica coffin survey until the ground thawed when he was finally interred. One of the things that we keyed in on was the very large number of post-depositional colonizers, things like ants and subterranean rove beetles that most likely were consuming most of the fly remains that would have been there, and one of the reasons why we're likely not seeing that. But because we were able to catch blowflies at that site throughout the entire year, that narrows down some of the species that we can look at for at least that larger puparia that we have on the side there, which does have the anal sclerites intact. At the Russell House, the big picture story there are foodways and food security. The people who lived there, they were not the wealthy individuals that lived in the big house. Those people had letters and paintings and other trappings of wealth that allow us to learn about their history and who they were. But the people who lived in the kitchen house, instead, we're able to use this biological evidence, these remains of the different seeds and other food that they were cooking, and also the pests that they had to compete with to maintain those nutritional needs as well. So in the going forward, one of the reasons why I really wanted to give this talk is to hopefully get some people excited about the idea of working with archaeologists. Right now, there is very little crossover between classically trained entomologists, specifically people who have those high-level skills for like third instar larval identification, things that would be really important for this type of work. And so I hope that I can encourage some people to be open to these kinds of collaborations should one of those ever come along for your as a possibility for you. Another thing that we need are accessible identification resources. So as far as chironomids are concerned, there are some really great pictorial identification resources. However, they are usually out of print, very expensive, not very easy to get your hands on. And for us over here in North America, there are even fewer of that. So using things like Lucid Keys, other ways of publishing pictorial resources like through the Journal of the Canadian Journal of Insect Identification. Those are resources that we can use to actually help promote this type of research and bring the standards up to something that we typically adhere to in entomology. So really quickly as I wrap this up, if you are around tomorrow, I just wanted to give a quick plug for my talk in our environmental forensics symposium. My talk is going to be on the mechanical vector ecology of blowflies. So if you are still around and you're interested, please do come on by and check that out. I definitely want to thank my funders, the USDA SARE program, Northeast SARE program, and the Fulbright Commission of Sweden. Archaeological entomology is quite niche, and there are not very many funding opportunities available to archaeologists in general. So I am really, really appreciative that I've been able to have support to continue doing this work, train new students, and bring other people into the fold as well. And of course, I would like to thank my co-author, my advisor, Dr. Krystal Hans, everybody in our lab, and all of the really fantastic people I have privilege of collaborating with on these projects. If you have any questions, I would love to hear from you right now, but of course, please do feel free to take down my email address and contact me if for any insect or archaeology related questions or reasons you might have. Thank you so much for your time tonight.